On and Lauren, if you want, take it from here.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kate. I want to echo your sentiments in welcoming everybody to this session. It's great to see all these long distance drop-ins, which is so cool. Kate, if you can advance to the next slide, please. Oh, back one. There we go. All right. Hi, guys. My name is Laura Hetzler. I am Academic Advisor 3 here at Wayne State University. I specialize in working with our pre-health science students and have had the opportunity to write dozens of letters for a variety of candidates over the years. We also used to run a credential service, which meant that we warehoused letters for students as they went through the professional school application process. So I was also able to read and review a bunch of letters as a part of overseeing that service we offered students. Presenting with me today is Lauren Orr. Lauren is a relatively new addition to our team here at Wayne State, but she brings a ton of fabulous experience from her previous position working at University of Pennsylvania. We've had a really good time putting this together. You can see our past activities have been extremely successful. You can see the giant spaghetti and marshmallow tower that we built earlier this fall, and we bring the same can-do attitude to presenting to you guys today. Next slide, please.
Oh, I don't know why it's doing that.
Thank you. So while the topic of this presentation is about writing letters, we both felt that it was important to start by saying that sometimes you shouldn't. So rather than assuming that we're writing, let's start at the very beginning, back when a student requests the letter. We want to encourage you to take a beat and really consider whether you're the best person to produce that recommendation. In our combined experience, where we've reviewed a lot of recommendation letters and seen some that are very strong and some that are less so, we've determined that the most powerful letters are written by somebody who has directly observed the applicant in action, and they're thus able to provide detailed evidence about the applicant's fit with the opportunity. So really interrogate, in what context do you know the student? To what type of opportunity are they applying, and what value would your perspective bring? Then you can decide whether you would best serve the student by producing a letter versus coaching them up about who they should ask instead. So this is our little decision tree. We'll be going into more detail about each level. Next slide, please. Okay, so sometimes not writing the letter is actually the best way to support the student. Our relationship with students as advisors frequently relies on self-reported information from the student, whereas, as I mentioned, the strongest letters contain directly observed evidence of behaviors, skills, attributes, etc. Rehashing the resume really isn't all that additive because the evaluators of the application have access to things like the resume. Our vantage point as advisors tends to be more at the sort of 10,000 foot view. So we can help them identify themes, we can highlight growth, but we're often less able to provide that really specific evidence unless maybe you've worked with a student on a departmental initiative or you supervise a work study student or something like that. Another big difference is that a supervisor or a professor could often provide a comparison of the applicant to past students that they've worked with in a way that an advisor is less able to do. So, I've been teaching for 7 years and I would put this student in the top 1% for the following reasons is something that a professor might be able to say, whereas an advisor, they're my favorite advisee, that's trickier. Admissions and acceptance committees may also have specific rules about who can submit letters of recommendation depending on the opportunity. And even if an advisor letter is permitted, would it carry as much weight as somebody like a professor? The thing is, our advisees ask us because they feel comfortable with us. We've established a solid relationship over time. We've been a constant presence in their academic journey, and that's all so valuable. But at the end of the day, it often makes us the easy ask rather than necessarily the best ask. So helping students to understand that can be a really powerful way of supporting their longer term goals. So I'm not saying you should never write the letter. I write plenty of letters. And I promise the presentation is soon going to pivot to best practices for doing so, but not yet. First, we're going to belabor this point just a little bit more. Next slide for Laura.
So we've kind of followed the no side of our decision tree and talking a little bit about how you can strategize working with your students and coaching them to find a better letter writer. So the first thing is sort of summarizing, explaining, and giving some of those details that Lauren just provided in the last 2 slides to help your students understand why you're saying no. It's not because you don't like them. It's not because you don't believe in them. It's because you recognize you don't have the best viewpoint for the information that's being requested by the admissions committee. Okay. So giving them some context around that can help sort of soften the blow of the no. And then you want to offer to help by brainstorming. You can take a step to review their CV with them, talk through their various work and activities, ask them questions like, who could comment on you as an individual outside the classroom? And also encourage them to think of specific instances where they believe a potential letter writer has observed strong behavior that aligns with this opportunity they're seeking, right? That step in particular, the identifying specific traits, characteristics, events that a supervisor or PI or someone might have observed, can also help that student maybe coach their actual letter writer a little bit. So you can help them practice approaching a faculty member with something about, I'm hoping you can comment on my resilience because you've seen me work in multiple courses. You've seen my ability to improve over time, like when I moved from being a C student with you to being a B student with you. I'm hoping you can comment on my dedication. So helping the student think through that can really ultimately lead to a much stronger letter than what we are able to provide. Next slide, please. So moving from back up our tree, back down to the yeses, our ability to be affirmative for our students. There are 3 main steps here. So it's basically information gathering, preparing to write, and writing. I'm going to tackle the information gathering on the next slide. Thanks, Kate. So as you talk to your students, someone comes in, you have decided you're going to say yes to them. There are 3 sort of big questions, right? You have to assess, what do you know about the candidate? You have to think about what the gaps are in what you know, and then you have to address how you're going to fill those gaps as you attempt to write this strong letter, because you may need to rely on some outside resources to provide the best piece of writing for them. So when you think about what you know, taking that moment to think about what has the context of your relationship with that student been, as well as, do you know very much about the process they're going through? Having been a pre-med advisor for 10 years now, I'm pretty familiar with that process. But when a student comes to me and has a specific, let's say, summer research opportunity or scholarship or fellowship, there may be some additional research that I need to do or gather from the student to be able to target my letter more appropriately. I think it is also really helpful as you assess what you need to know is asking the student why they think it's a good fit for them. Because just asking that question can help you start to connect the dots for the student between your observed behaviors, what they're attempting to achieve, and how you can target the information you're sharing with the admissions committee to best advocate for your student. You are also probably going to need things like program details, deadlines, and the student may have some thoughts about what they believe you can add to their application. I like to sometimes ask, what do you think I will say about you? That gives a sense both of the trust within our relationship, but also the self-awareness of the student, and kind of trying to make sure that what I have aligned in my brain as the way I'm going to phrase or focus my mission actually fits with what the student believes to be true. So where are you going to get this information? Definitely the student can provide to you, and you can ask for written materials, their CV, a statement of purpose, all of those things that are going to help you align your your observations with what the student's goals are. So you're getting the student perspective, so you can then layer in your perspective. We're fortunate enough here on campus to have a great STARS Notes system. STARS Notes can be nice because if you've got that historic relationship with them and you can go back over time, just rereading those notes can help you remember or identify some of the qualities you value in this student. I find emails can also be a great way to do this. Tracking conversations I've had with a student, tracking their decision making through those emails is useful. And then if that's not enough, sometimes having a semi interview style conversation with the student, again, to fill in some gaps. I'm going to turn it back to Lauren to dig into the best practices that you'll use after you've done your information gathering. Next slide, please.
Thank you. Okay, so Laura's been talking about the importance of knowing the applicant, knowing the opportunity that they're applying for. There's a few more sort of things to know as a best practice. The first is the audience who will be reading your recommendation, just so that you can sort of pitch accordingly. You might write a little differently if you're writing for, say, a faculty audience versus an audience of their peers. Knowing the submission system so that you don't waste your time. Recently, I wrote a letter for a student and then logged into the submission system only to learn that what was actually required was a paragraph. So all that work for nothing. It's good to check on these things in advance. And often those submission systems will also have like a rubric of different qualities that you're meant to sort of rate the student on. And knowing those before you write the letter can also be really helpful. Also knowing the selection criteria so that you can help to make the case for fit. So I used to be a fellowships advisor. A lot of fellowships would have very specific selection criteria like leadership, commitment to service, and knowing those nuances of what the committee is reading for helps you to make sure that you include those in your letters. The next tip is to connect the dots. And by that, we mean to really consider the full application that's being submitted. What is the committee going to already have access to? They're going to know the applicant's GPA, major, minor, if a transcript is being submitted. They're going to know their list of campus activities if a resume is being submitted. So you don't need to restate all of that. Instead, you can sort of connect those dots and help flesh it out as something that's a bit more additive. Yes, because as we indicated, advisors are often well positioned to highlight themes and speak to growth over time. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next best practice that we have for you is to contextualize appropriately. And by that, we mean a couple of things. The first is to remember to define campus-specific or community-specific terms. Spell out your acronyms. Don't assume that, what something is at your institution is, how it's referred to at other institutions. And then also consider what does the reader need to understand about this unique context to appreciate how the applicant stands out within it. You do want to articulate the nature of your relationship to the applicant, but don't go overboard. Something that Laura and I, both remembered seeing in letters was when a writer would spend paragraphs talking about themselves or their course, which is really not in the best service to the candidate. It can just be a sentence or two. Next up is be specific. We want you to remember to provide concrete examples to illustrate your claims. That writing adage of show, don't tell absolutely applies to letters of recommendation. And, write about directly observed characteristics that, are associated with the opportunity that the student is applying for. Being vague doesn't stick the way that being specific does. Next up is to humanize the applicant. It's your job to really bring them to life by using vivid language and anecdotes, which help them stand out in a stack of applications where readers are often reading quickly and one candidate blends into the next. You want to write a letter that makes the reader think, this is somebody I want to meet, especially because frequently interviewing would be the next step if a candidate advances. And this requires a level of humanness from the writer too. Write like a person. With all the talk in the news about the AI chatbots, I think a good test is, could AI have generated my letter? If so, you could probably do even better. Next slide, please. Okay. And then for additional best practices, next up is to be mindful about disclosure. We want to encourage you to seek permission before including any potentially sensitive material that's not already present in the application materials. So for example, you might think that an applicant's ability to thrive in the aftermath of some hurdle shows amazing grit, and you want to convey that in the letter, but would the applicant be comfortable with that story being told? Next up is avoiding bias, as well as avoiding faint praise. With regard to bias, be aware of unconscious bias. For example, research has shown that women are more likely to be described with rhinestone adjectives that praise their work ethic, whereas men are more likely to be described in a manner that praises their innate talent. These are things that we can all be watching out for. Faint praise, we want to not be so excited about a candidate meeting baseline expectations. Carrie is always on time for appointments and ready to discuss their degree audit. That's, one would hope, right? That doesn't make the reader get really excited about the candidate. But on the same sort of wavelength, you also want to avoid hyperbole, because it can weaken your overall support for the candidate if effusive praise feels unearned. And then finally, give yourself plenty of time. It takes time to write a strong letter of recommendation. Often more than one sitting, you may need to reach back out to the applicant for something, certainly going to want to proofread. And Laura is going to talk a lot more about this on the next slide.
Should we, there's a question about, is verbal permission from the student enough to include potentially sensitive information?
I would think so.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually what I practice is just, I will circle back with the student and ask, hey, I was going to talk about this. Is that okay with you? So, yeah.
Good. Okay.
Right.
Is this it?
This is, thank you. All right. So sitting down to write can be intimidating, but if you've been following kind of these steps we've been outlining, most of the hard work is actually done. So I'm going to give you all kind of a peek at my process. I think it's a similar kind of approach that other people use, but just to give you a sense of how you're going to maybe tackle this so it's not too overwhelming. It is, as Lauren said, extremely time consuming. I find I spend about 3 to 4 sessions per letter that I write for a student. When a student comes, students will typically make this ask of me in an advising appointment. At that point, I go right into my calendar and I block some time, maybe 4 to 7 days away, where I'm going to sit down and spend an hour on a rough draft of a letter. Okay. The other thing I do the day I get asked to write a letter is I jot down some brainstorming notes. I jot down kind of contextualization, specific evidence, my overall impressions of the student and what their strengths are. And this is sort of my first ideas down on paper, so that when I sit down to do the draft, I've already started processing it. And I really try to call attention to any themes I've observed and try to dig into what is that specific evidence. This is maybe where I reference my notes, my emails the most, is as I'm doing some quick brainstorming. I try to do it day of, because that's when I'm the most excited about it. And it's when I've got the freshest ideas to sit in support of the student. Then on the rough draft day, the day that I've blocked time on my calendar, the first thing I have to do is I have to be really vigilant about protecting my time. I don't know if other people on this call succumb to this, but it's very easy to give my time away to things that are not the priority on my calendar. So really setting a boundary around, this is the hour I'm going to sit down and work. I need to sit down and do this, not answer emails or work on a different project. Once I've worked on that draft, I need to give it at least 24 hours. So I need to, and then I'll come back and I will give it a strong revision. Just like when I work with students on their professional school applications, I find that my initial writing is kind of garbage. It is usually too self-referential about me and my thoughts and less focused on the student side, or at least making sure my language is student focused as opposed to using a lot of me or I statements. I also find it usually needs more details and more specificity. This may prompt me to reach out and ask additional follow-up questions to the student after reading this, going through the second draft. And then sometimes I need to come back a fourth time to do a final polishing. So it's very layered. I find that taking the space away from it is really helpful in terms of bringing my own fresh eyes to the project. All right, so there are a couple of resources I like to use in this process. First one is a template. Now, when I say template, I don't mean that I've got 3/4 of a letter drafted and I'm just trying to change names and pronouns. What I mean is I have a template of letterhead. It's got a greeting at the top. It's got a brief, like Lauren said, 1 to 2 sentences, just description of who I am, what my position is, so that I don't have to regenerate that every time. It's got a closing at the bottom with my signature and my contact information. So I use that, I create a save as, and I save it as the student name so that each time I don't have to replicate some of it, I don't have to regenerate that. It takes, again, some of the burden off. I love to use an online thesaurus. I find that I will reuse the same vocabulary words over and over again, and using an online thesaurus is an easy way to check that. It's also an easy way to check being exposed to a variety of language can help me get unstuck. If I'm stuck writing something, it can help me vary the tone of my language and make sure the tone of my language is meeting my audience and that it's appropriate. And then finally, I mentioned looking at with my own fresh eyes, but getting a colleague, a trusted colleague to read can also be useful, particularly if you are sharing some sensitive issues, or if you're uncertain whether or not your message is coming through. Having somebody else take a look, particularly if they don't know the student, is really, really useful. All right. We're going to move on to our resource slide next, where there's some other tools you might want to access.
Yeah, so going from the bottom up, we have put together a handout that covers those best practices from a little bit earlier in the presentation. So that will be coming your way, and we hope you'll find it helpful. We've also hyperlinked these, so when Kate shares the slideshow, you'll have access to these other resources. There's a handout created by the University of Arizona on avoiding gender bias that gets referenced really frequently, so you'll have access to that. If you want to take a very deep dive into this topic, there's Joe Schall's writing recommendation letters. I think I saw Penn State in the attendees list. Joe Schall is or was a Penn State guy who gets really into this stuff. And then Laura, the top one is your contribution.
Yeah, so like I said, I do a lot of pre-health advising. So what's hyperlinked here is the core competencies from the American Association of Medical Colleges. What I love about it is that it has a set of intra and interpersonal traits that are useful in a variety of professions and fields, and they're great sets of skills and attributes. And so I find that sometimes when I read through it, it helps me identify those specific qualities of the candidate that I want to highlight. And even matching it up with the particular opportunity, if it's an opportunity that's talking about students who have come from a challenging background. You looking at the words like the grit and resiliency help me identify what it is I want to share about the candidate with the admissions team. So I would encourage you to take a look at that and use it as you see fit. So our last slide, our next slide, just has our contact information. If you want to reach out, ask any questions, we would love to continue the conversation if that's helpful. Oh, it went away. And obviously you can grab a screenshot now, but when you get these slides, we are happy to help in any way we can. Thank you so much.
So I'm gonna stop sharing and grab the other PowerPoint, but Laura, while I do that, there's a question about from an advisor who works with students 100% online. They meet with students for advising 30 to 40 minutes each time. we do ask for a resume to help with writing recommendations. Any suggestions you can provide, you or Lauren, to this specific population? I'll let you answer that while I switch slides.
So I don't know about you, Lauren, but I do find that in the last 2 years in particular, I think we've all had to figure out what's it like to develop relationships with students online. It's really, really challenging. That's where I find, because we also have 30-minute appointments, right? So we're seeing people for around the same amount of time that the questioner is, and working to develop that relationship. I think part of what I look at is her entire relationships with students are based on these conversations, or at least for the most part. And it's through the stories they share with me, through the opportunities and challenges they have as I build my case notes, the specific instances of some of that I find useful to reference. We also will frequently tap our students to be student speakers or volunteer with us. And again, some of those events may still be virtual. So all of this to say, I do think it's possible to build that. I think it's that contextual piece that you're focused on providing, as opposed to I saw them interacting with somebody out in the real world. Most of that is not what I'm including in my letters anyhow. I don't know about you, Lauren.
No, I thumbs up to all of that.
Okay, great. Well, we'll have hopefully a little time at the end for questions on both the letter writing for students and the next part of our presentation, which is writing for our colleagues or professional letters for others where we work, or as they apply for promotions or other jobs, or for admission to grad programs, and also a little bit on writing award nominations. So I've introduced myself. Fawn, would you like to introduce yourself as well while we get started?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm Fawn Alasri. I am an academic advisor and part-time faculty in our College of Education here at Wayne State University. I primarily work in the area of kinesiology, health, and sports studies. Nice to see you all today.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to give a little bit of background too, because this presentation was originally geared for Wayne State advisors. And I think it's going to apply to all advisors. But just so you know, at Wayne State, we have a very specific promotion process. We have advisor rankings from advisor 1 all the way up through advisor 4. So a lot of times advisors are going up for promotion at different times. They might be going from a 1 to a 2, or a 2 to a 3, or going from a 3 to a 4. We have specific factors that indicate what an advisor 4 advisor looks like versus an advisor 2. And so we are often referring to specific factors when it comes to writing a letter for a colleague. We also at Wayne State have an employment security process, which grants job security very similar to tenure. And that is the process that an advisor has to apply for around year 5. And they also have to submit a proposal to go up for ESS and include letters and evidence of work performance. So just a little background as we get started on that information. So similar to Laura and Lauren, the first thing that happens is the ask, right? So the first thing that we're often presented with is a request to write a letter for a colleague. And just like I explained, sometimes it doesn't come directly from the candidate. A lot of times that request might come from a supervisor of the candidate asking on behalf of the candidate for a letter of recommendation. Or it could come from, a grad program saying that you were named as a potential evaluator for a candidate who's applying for a grad program. So just keeping in mind that you might not be approached by the candidate themselves. So when you are asked by a supervisor, or you're getting an auto request from another institution or for a grad app, the first thing you might want to consider is why you were asked, right? Without a lot of context, you might want to think about why you were tapped to write a letter for that person. Knowing that a packet, evaluation packet, a nomination, a request to go up for promotion, those people need a range of letters. So you might want to think about how your letter will contribute to the overall submission for that candidate. What can you in particular talk about for that candidate that others might not be able to talk about? How is your relationship unique? But you might also be asked directly by that candidate. And that is where you could have a deeper conversation with that candidate and might ask, why me? Why did you select me to write a letter for you? This allows you to have a deeper conversation, come to some sort of understanding about how your letter is going to fit in that overall packet. It also helps with some understandings and expectations on the part of the letter writer, but also on the part of the candidate asking. You might want to say, well, I can certainly speak to the work that we did on that initiative or that collaboration that we did. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to speak to these aspects of your job performance. And so having that conversation really helps you as the writer, know what lane you're going to stay in when writing that letter. And the candidate understands what you're going to be providing for their overall packet. You'll know what to emphasize or what to focus on if that candidate says, yes, I want you to speak to my professional development, because I know that we did a lot of workshops together, a lot of training together. We worked on that initiative together, but I know that you're not going to be speaking to specifically how I work with students because you don't know me in that capacity. And Vaughn and I really, in our working on this presentation, when it comes to writing letters for our colleagues, we both have kind of the same philosophy. If you can say yes, by all means, try to say yes. Now, we know that sometimes that might be limited. And similar to the writing for a student, you might have to put boundaries on that yes. If you haven't been given enough time, or if you really don't feel that you can support that candidate in a positive, supportive way, then similar to writing for students, you might not be the best person to write that letter. But considering that you were asked, and you could have a conversation with that candidate and really understand what they're asking you to speak to, and can you do that in a positive, supportive, superlative way, then if you can, find a way to say yes and support that colleague in their professional development, in their work, in their promotion process. So now you've said yes, you've committed. What do you need to know? How do you need to move forward? So before you even start writing, just remember some of the things you might want to make sure you've gotten down. What is a due date? Speaking for our process at Wayne State, when you are asked to write a letter for promotion or for employment security, you're given a very firm due date. Your school or college might be different from another school or college. I've written letters for advisors across many schools and colleges across Wayne State, and they all seem to have different timelines. Sometimes things are due in December, some are due in January, some are due in February. So you need to be very clear on when the due date is and who does the letter go to. Usually you're not sending the letter to the candidate themselves. Are you sending it to the supervisor? Or is there a portal that you need to upload to? So very similar to with students, if a candidate, if a colleague is applying to grad school, they might have a portal that you need to upload your letter to. So being clear on where the letter goes. This is a Wayne State thing, but often when you write a letter of evaluation or recommendation for promotion or employment security, you also have to include a very short bio on you, the letter writer. So is that required? And making sure that you fulfill that obligation. And then you want to look for any special instructions or requests. Are you being asked to speak to certain competencies or certain skills for the candidate or certain experiences? So being clear on what exactly you're supposed to be submitting. The materials that you need. These are the things that are usually provided, but sometimes they're not, and you might want to reach out and request this. A professional record, a CV. I usually, and Fawn as well, we usually print those, read those, and annotate the heck out of them. Where are what are the things that jump off the page? Where are you aligning with that applicant as far as experiences and the things you can speak to? Also, their personal statement. When you apply for promotion or employment security, the candidate has written a very, very lengthy justification for their promotion, and usually those are provided as well. So I usually print those, read those, highlight, annotate those, the things that I know I'm excited to speak to. And then, of course, your firsthand experiences with the colleague. This is where all that reflection comes in. Like Laura was saying, what are you excited to speak about? What's going to help you bring that candidate to life? And those are the things that I usually star and highlight and write my personal reflections down. I want to make sure that I don't forget to talk about those certain things. At this point, we're going to move on to the writing approaches. Oh, we have one more slide. I apologize. I want to just give a little bit of information on the difference between a promotion letter and an employment security letter. So just briefly for our Wayne State people, make sure that you're considering the initial job description versus where the candidate is right now at their work level. So if you're writing about a promotion from a 3 to a 4, don't speak about how they were first hired in. You really want to think about what kind of work the applicant is doing right now at their current time. Are they doing the work at that higher level? Refer to those promotion factors. Are they doing the work of a 4 as a 3? Those are the things that you want to really reflect on and think about and highlight in your letter. Focus on the time since their last promotion, not since they're higher. There's often 3 to 4 years in between those promotions. So speak to the time from when they were a 2 to that promotion to a 3 and focus on that time and what they've achieved during that time. Focus on their leadership roles. And this is good for all of our professionals in this training. Think about their leadership roles, what committees that they've led or that have taken a part of. What task forces, what boards, where have they shown leadership on campus? Service to the university. Are they the one that's always volunteering at commencement or at orientation in different roles? Where have they shown service to the university? And what other initiative, what contribution have they made? Have they initiated on their own? How have those initiatives enhanced the overall unit and made it better and stronger and more superlative since their time there? For employment security, many times you are asked to speak to that because this is tenure, this is a job for life. You need to speak to that candidate's future contributions, how you see them making future contributions to the university and where you see their commitment to their unit and their commitment to Wayne State University, because they are up for a tenured position essentially at the institution. All right, Fawn.
Thanks, Kate. So I'm going to be talking about writing approaches. And before I even start to talk about this, I want to point out that Kate and I do not feel like we're experts here. I think our styles are similar, but each of us, we have a different approach in how we approach writing a letter for a colleague. And we all have a different flair, so to speak, right? So speaking for myself, my approach has certainly evolved over the past many years since I've been at Wayne State. And I think ultimately our goal here is to make sure that each of you leaves this meeting with hopefully at least one new tip, that you can take when you're asked to write letters for colleagues. Both of us feel very passionate about writing letters for colleagues, almost as a responsibility, if you will, because our colleagues are relying on us, right? Okay. So Kay, I think you can move on. to the next one too. Okay, so each of us approaches this differently. Laura kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. It's creating an outline is just kind of like getting your thoughts organized. We've hopefully reviewed some materials from the candidate, from our colleague. I heavily rely on anything that the candidate has written about themselves first, and want to kind of pinpoint certain things and pick out certain things. And so I want to make sure that that is included, obviously, in my outline. I also want to stress like staying in your lane. I think it's easy sometimes to kind of want to talk about a variety of different things regarding your colleague. We have a lot to say probably with certain people, but we also want to keep in mind why they asked us. Kate mentioned that earlier. Really important, if our letter is kind of working within a set of materials, we want to make sure that we speak directly to the component that colleague wants us to write about or emphasize. So, if your experience is working as a colleague with advising initiatives, then speak to that. If it's training and you've worked with this person to present and workshops and done, different trainings, speak to that. But just know specifically that it's not always necessary to comment on the full range. So stay in your lane. And I think what's really important, because these letters, they're not going to be lengthy, you're probably going to have to try to fit whatever you want to say within 1.5 pages, if that. So make sure you leave room for firsthand experiences, your impressions of your colleague. That's really what the important connection would be to this person. And then always include like the frame of reference. How long have you been working perhaps with this colleague, but like you've been here a while, maybe you're a senior advisor. So like in your 15 years or so in higher education, how does this colleague or this person rank compared with others going up for promotion at that same rank? And then lastly, just kind of start writing. Sometimes it's just good to get things out. So you have these thoughts in your brain, you don't want to miss out on any of them. So just start typing. It doesn't have to be pretty. Just, get some thoughts down. You can go to it, right? You can go back to it. And this is at least how I kind of process it. Just get some things down. You do not want to miss out on things you really want to emphasize. And then, the editing process, and I'm going to get to that separately, but just kind of remember your nouns, making sure you're just focusing on the grammar, keep your tenses the same, be concise. I think sometimes in my editing process, it's just going back and taking out extraneous words and revising sentences and just kind of keep it concise, because the words that you're putting on this page, in my mind, are just super important. So just get what you want to say out without using extra stuff. All right, next slide there, Kate.
It won't go. Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Okay. Templates are our friends. I love what Laura said. She has this template that she works from. She copies it. I do the exact same thing. I keep probably 3 to 4 different templates at hand at any given time. And the reason I have more than a few is just because sometimes we're asked to write letters for different people going up for promotion. So, when the committees are reading them, they don't want to see the rote information and the routine stuff. And so you have to have different stock templates, but you don't have to use the same verbiage all the time. So it is really important to kind of rotate through those templates and review them, and update them as necessary. So really, really critical there. But, the basics, the intro paragraph, what you're trying to do, I'm writing this letter of recommendation on behalf of so-and-so going up for promotion. I have the privilege of, writing about or talking or speaking to this person's experiences. Paragraph 2, obviously, how your role or your responsibilities kind of intersect with that person, how long you've known the candidate, what kinds of, maybe introduce some of the things that you've worked with that candidate or colleague on. But obviously the main paragraphs are what's most important. Really the details about why you're really just writing this recommendation for this person or this evaluation. Reference what the candidate mentions in their own words. So like they'll have their personal statement. Pick out something that you can speak directly on. Don't go into super a very much detail, but talk a little bit more to it so that you can supplement what that person has said about themselves or their experience or how they led a certain initiative. Your perspective will just add to their information. So it can give them strength, give added strength to a particular event or initiative. Go deeper, obviously, on what you know based on your own personal experiences. That's really important. You want to be human. You want to show, the growth perhaps of someone presenting, for example, in a workshop or leading an initiative, leading a project or something. And I feel Kate and I talked about this. We feel it's okay to specify that you're limiting your comments based on a specific part of the candidate's job performance or possibly service component or even just professional achievement. So, we have different categories in which we're evaluated. And it's okay not to speak on everything. Just kind of, again, stay in your lane and talk specifically about what the candidate wants you to talk about. And then lastly, it's just the wrap up language, the contact information, the signature, and all of that stuff. All right, so the editing process, for me, like Laura, it's days, it's hours, it's time consuming. I do feel like this is a big responsibility. Our colleagues are relying on us. They want support, they want recognition, and I really think it goes to the top of my list when it comes to tasks. So as long as we're given enough time to say yes and do this, I don't think there's probably a more important role than the support of our colleagues. So I feel very strongly on that. So make the time. Your colleague is counting on you. Return as many times as needed to revise. I always have a 24-hour to 48-hour rule. I need to come back to it because some days I'm not very good at writing. And if it's been a long day and I'm out of words and my brain is just not on full function, I have to step back from it. So there are some days where I'm just on fire and I'm like, oh, that sounded really great, and I feel really good. So I have to go day to day and just to see, come back to it as often as you need. So the 24-hour, 48-hour rule, make whatever rule that works for you, sleep on it, take a day. You'll at a certain point, you've done this long enough, you're going to have go-to sentences, go-to statements. That is great. Okay. Some statements are very impactful. Somebody reading your letter, it jumps out at somebody. Those are really good to have. So review them often, apply as necessary, but also save new ones to your bank. I have a separate Word document. I have a list of specific sentences. I'm thinking that's really great sentence to put for this person. Tweak it as necessary, of course, make it personal, but I think that's really important to have a bank. And then try to read it from different perspectives. So as you're to the point of finalizing it, read it from you as the colleague for this person, but also read it from, put yourself in their shoes. Is this letter going to say what they want it to say? And then also read it from whomever you assume will be reading it, your audience. So is it going to their supervisor? Read it from that kind of perspective. And it's really important that you're also, you want to convey what you hope will be conveyed to all different people reading it. So the supervisor is important. There's often a committee who reads your letter. So, take that angle as well, but really try to read it from different perspectives. I've often changed or revised some things based on who I thought it was most impactful for reading it. And then just basically, does the letter say what you intend, right?
All right.
Pass it over to Kate now.
Okay, so we're going to move on from this and talk about award nominations. So this might not be something you do very often, maybe once a year, twice a year, maybe every couple years. It's a kind of a different animal, right? You're nominating a colleague or yourself for an advising award or for some sort of award, some sort of recognition. Again, consider your role, consider your responsibility to help others, to help a colleague, to help your unit get recognized, your team, to help them get the recognition that they deserve. One of the things that we want to emphasize as maybe a different approach would be to work with others. You don't have to be the only one working on an award nomination. You can pull in colleagues, you can pull in your supervisor. You can pull in somebody that you know knows this candidate. Hey, would you like to work with me to nominate so-and-so for a NACADA award or for a campus award? That can often equal a stronger nomination. It spreads the burden of the nomination out, and it can actually result in a stronger nomination altogether. One of the things we do want to emphasize, like we've done all along, is start early and give yourself time. Obviously, you need to be aware of when the nominations are due, when the nominations go live, and you can start working on it. But you want to give yourself time to pull other perspectives in, and maybe collect statements from other people that can help add some texture and some color to your nomination. So start early. Right now, go find out when these award nominations are due and start thinking about who you might want to nominate and who can help you. One of the things we want to emphasize that's a little different than a letter is that this is where you can be more emphatic. You can add stronger language. You can add more color and texture. Go out and get some student perspectives, get other perspectives from colleagues, add stories and examples. These are the things that show those qualities instead of telling about those qualities. So give yourself time to write to a few letters and get some other context that you can add in. A couple other things that you want to know before writing is you want to look for rubrics. So if it's a NACADA award, I know that there's rubrics available on the NACADA website. If there are other kinds of awards, look for rubrics that help you understand what they're looking for, what the qualities are that they're looking to award, what kind of traits that you should be emphasizing. So what kind of award is it? And that will really help you with your approach to writing that award nomination. Again, some of the same materials for writing letters. You want a professional record. You want any sort of personal statement if the person is also involved in this nomination. Look back at past materials that you might have on this candidate. Also want to reflect on your firsthand experiences, reflect on your connection, make lots of notes, write down certain anecdotes or certain things that you worked with that candidate on. At Wayne State, we have a Think and Advisor program. You might want to collect some Think and Advisor examples from that candidate. It's okay to let them know that you're nominating them. That might be how you get their professional record in the first place. And then maybe ask, do you have any Think and Advisor examples that you could provide, so that you can get some quotes from students and include them in your nomination. These really bring the nomination to life. One of the things that you'll see in the NACADA tips is that it's important to emphasize the quality of the candidate over quantity. So a direct quote from their tip page is that it's best to submit only letters or materials that add substance to the nomination. Quality is appreciated more than quantity. A well-written and documented submission increases the likelihood of a positive outcome. It's important to read the criteria very carefully. They emphasize this. Is it asking for information on certain competencies? Speak to the nature of the award or the scholarship, or to any guidelines or criteria being requested. So that's on their global awards tip page. It's also a good idea to review the NACADA core values. So that's also available on the NACADA webpage. If you could think about and reflect on those core values with the candidate in mind, and come up with which of those values, what you can speak to, what experiences you have with that candidate that can really emphasize those core values. And again, like was mentioned before with students, same goes with candidates, colleagues, and other professional submissions. It's best to show through stories and anecdotes and quotes, and not just tell about a candidate's values and virtues and qualities. I have some resources as well. The one that the first two are specifically on submitting awards and letters of support from NACADA. The last one is a really excellent writer support page on their global writing, NACADA's Global Writing Days page. If you're somebody that just finds writing really hard, let me see if I can go to that. Let's see, can you see this page still? If you're somebody that finds writing really hard and you struggle with it, I can't emphasize, I really like this page a lot. This is for anything from trying to work on an article or writing a letter for a colleague. It just helps you approach the writing process, how you should prepare. Like Laura was saying, blocking time out on your calendar, finding a place to work that's free from distraction, using your time, scheduling breaks, just all kinds of things about approaching writing in the first place, and making sure that you're in a good place to do the job. So I will include these resources on the PowerPoint that we send out, so that you can get to this page pretty easily. So we're really at time. We don't have a ton of time, but if anybody does want to unmute and ask some questions, you certainly can to either to any of the presenters. And if not, I just want to thank you guys for attending. I'm sorry we didn't have a lot more time for questions, but I really appreciate your attendance. But we'll hang out here for a few minutes. All right, guys, well, we can jump off too. And I will definitely send out the presentations and all the links and everything like that to everybody. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, you guys. Great job.
Yes.
You too. Have a great weekend, guys.
You too. Thank you. Thanks, Margaret. Bye. Good job, Fawn.
You too. You too. Nice job.
You did really well.
It was
All
good.
right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Yep. Bye.
Bye.